yellow dots on the ground, folks. There's some around here. They're for a game we like to call Corona Twister. Anyone get the idea? Corona Twister, COVID Twister. Pick a dot and stand on it, and you'll be 1.5 metres away from everyone you came on holiday with. And it's popular around my house at Christmas. It's one of my favourite games, and to get to be 1.5 metres away from all my relatives as well. Which is particularly important because they spit. So, that's important for today, COVID Twister. And welcome to the island. There's two names for the island. The first is Sarah, and the other one, Langarera, is the Palawa name for the island of Aboriginal people who've been living here 2,000 plus generations, and they've been coming in here mainly to Macquarie Harbour as a meeting point during the summertime. Good tucker on the coast, and there's all sorts of opportunities for meeting up and trading. The Tidnik, Nimigan, Lauren and the Neem tribes, people are coming in here, and they use this as a meeting point. Langarera. Sarah Island is a penal colony from the years of 1822 to 1833. 12 years it ran. It was 200 years ago, and in fact it was known as hell on earth, the harshest punishment settlement in all the land. And it was for convicts, criminals from England who reoffended in Australia were sent here to Sarah Island. It was designed to be hell, and it was designed to set them straight. It kind of worked, and I'll tell you how it worked in a minute. But first we'll introduce the first ever man put in charge of this tough, unruly lot of convicts. The first ever commandant, his name was Lieutenant Cuthbertson, and he was described by people around him as a sadistic bully with peculiar qualities. Anyone got any of those they're willing to share with us today? Lieutenant Cuthbertson, the sadistic bully, left the island in a peculiar way, in fact. The first ever boat built on Sarah Island broke its moorings during a storm, so Lieutenant Cuthbertson jumped in his own small dinghy to go and save it. And he paddled over and saved the boat from smashing up on the rocks, and went almost all the way back to shore here in a wild storm. It was flung into the water just offshore here. He started drowning and yelling for help, 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 to the convicts who just stood there and waved back. It was Christmas Day as well, in fact, so there's your holiday story, folks. Happy holidays. Welcome to the island. There's a couple of things we're going to point out for you today. This is the mustyard where you all are standing. Have a look around. It's where everyone gathered morning and evening, just like this, if you can. Given duties for the day. Main duties were going up the rivers, collecting human pine logs. And in fact, there was all sorts of people here. 380 convicts at the most, and 95 military, who were the guards of the convicts. So it was all busy, this area, and there was all sorts of bootmakers, quarries, engineers, shipyards where you walk through, and all sorts of stuff built up along the coast. In fact, the convicts built this land itself. This is reclaimed land. We're going to have a look up the coast here and have a look in the waters to see what the convicts built. They did all sorts of construction to make this place their home. And if you want an idea of what it used to look like, check out the pictures there, because they're true depictions of how it looked. All that stuff was wooden buildings, and they're all rotted away. So you're left with all sorts of piles of bricks. So if you're into that sort of thing, piles of bricks, you're in luck today. Now let's go up the path here and have a look in the water, see what the convicts have done. This was a dock here for storing small boats. It was built by the convicts, and they piled it up with earth and so on there. There was commissariat stores on that big promontory there, tea, rum, sugar and tobacco, and there were small boats in the dock next door. Those were like small boats for ferrying cargo in and out. There was all sorts constructed along the shore made out of wood, and this was all under constant guard. The convicts were tempted to take it on escape attempts. You know, there are 180 escape attempts with Sarah Island's 12 years. 1 in 5 attempts were successful attempts, including a man called James Goodwin who made it through the scrub, and he took quite 6 weeks, quite some time, went through the thick bush, wild weather, rain and hail, all the way to the outskirts of Hobart town itself. It was an incredible journey, and as soon as he got to Hobart, he was immediately recaptured. They didn't send him back here to Sarah Island. Instead, they sent him to the Surveyor General's office to map out the Central Highlands for him. He was a lucky fella. And he drew a map of his route out. His map made it here to Sarah Island, and the convicts started using it. In fact, it was the best form of contraband, and the convicts knew how to escape, because plenty of them were escape artists. Now, escape attempts dropped to nothing in 1829. Something made the convicts stay, and that's the military barracks over there. Let's go up the path here. There's a bit of shelter in the trees, and we'll have a look up here. This side of the island was vegetable patches, and the convicts had cleared it out as soon as they arrived, and pretty well immediately built windbreak fences out of the trees they cut down because it got real stormy. You know these cottages here? The commandant lived in the far one there. Military, or rather doctors behind me, military officer there, and the chaplain in the farthest cottage. There were several doctors throughout the island's history. Two of whom were more than slightly mad. I don't know what they were mad about, and one was drunk the whole time he was here. His name was Dr. Garrett, and he'd come to hell on earth on his honeymoon, folks. Any of you guys planned a holiday like that? I certainly haven't yet. The next house over is the military officer Major Champ, and the farthest one is the chaplains Reverend William Schofield and his wife Martha, who are Wesleyan Methodists, and they converted most of the convicts, in fact, because the convicts all knew as soon as they convert, they get the best jobs on the island. So plenty of them went for it, including Thomas Day, who even got his own fireplace and house. That's it there. Later he was sent to Port Arthur, where he became a Presbyterian, and then an Anglican, and then a Catholic last of all. He was a very religious dude. These bricks through the trees are the remains of servants' quarters, and you can see through the trees that way as the rain eases up a little bit. A perfectly preserved example of an early 19th century pizza oven through there. Not a bad design, that. And the first pile of bricks here is the hot water system for the island, where they had a constantly burning fire for cooking and cleaning. Now these convicts, well, they were a hard-working breed. They were constantly getting injured and working hard with big machinery and big logs. So they needed a good doctor to care for them, and so when this drunken Dr. Garrett started stitching up the wrong wounds because he was an alcoholic, they came up with a plan to oust him. They bribed the gardener, William Sylvester, and we're actually going to reenact this today. G'day, Bill. How do you feel about this?
You got him. Right.
Oh, well, beautiful. You're in for a treat, Bill. We're going to reenact how we bribed you, the convicts, to run down the garden path past the doctor's newly married wife in a sensitive situation with her 7-year-old sister Mary sunbaking on the porch. Can you do a jog down there and set the scene for us? Good. Keep going. Oh, wait, stop, mate. You got to be stark naked while you do it. It's part of the history. You're not going to do it. We'll leave it.
A little wet.
It is a little wet and a little bit cold. In fact, we'll just imagine that you cleared out the doctor and his whole family within a week. So you're a successful dude. You got a quid of tobacco that. You were sent for the jail for that, of course. And but you're in Australia's records as Australia's very first ever streaker. So well done, Bill the gardener. Now let's go up the path here.
March up here. More old buildings. The lime pit.
Yeah, how they make their mortar.
Without a sign on it, that pile of bricks like a container over there is a lime pit. It's storing lime which is brought in from the Gordon River and used here on the vegetable patches as fertiliser and on the long drop toilets as chemical disposal. Has anyone been using long drop toilets recently? No? You did? You stand at Storm Villages? They wouldn't do that to you. Well, the lime was also used with the mortar here and the brickwork here. The bricks were brought in from a kiln 2 kilometres that way, and the bricks here are quite solid. You can see how thick the walls are. It's a solitary confinement jail, and there's 6 cells inside of it. That's one exposed for us today there. and it wasn't used too often because it was a really tough psychological torture on the convicts. So it was an alternative to the physical punishment system that was already going on strong on the island, of the floggings. Has anyone heard of a cat of nine tails? Yep. Well, here they had their own version, Macquarie Harbour cat, and they put pieces of lead in it and soaked it in the ocean to make it really horrible. It was tough on the convicts. They started escaping. They started attacking one another and the military, and they struck in the work gangs as well. This place was starting to get tumultuous, and in 1825, Matthew Brady decided to escape from here with a plan. He wanted to capture the commandant and use him as a hostage and come and attack the settlement and set everyone free. Except in a tragic turn of events, he caught the drunken Dr. Garrett by mistake, folks. There was no use as a hostage because no one wanted him back, not even his family, in fact. So all Matthew Brady did was take the boat and go round to Hobart Town, where he started bushranging and built himself a bit of an army, a gang, and a reputation. He had a beard, kind of like yours, and was a very rebellious figure. He did wild things like take over Sorel and all sorts. He broke into mansions and stole boats. He got the military shaken here in their boots, and the convicts here were starting to think of rebellion. So Governor Arthur, he did something wild. He ordered a hanging to occur here on the island. 3 men who he knew had committed murder in what he thought were escape attempts. Except he was wrong, because on the day when the convicts were set to hang, all the convicts were laughing and joking and happy. It was a carnival, and what the convicts all knew was that the convicts who committed murder had killed their friends as part of a suicide pact. It was actually a joke to them, because they knew the convicts were getting a better way out and going straight up to heaven. They'd planned it all. So if you come down the path here, I'll tell you about the bacon. Let's come down here. Welcome to the old convict tanning salon, folks. If you're willing to try it out, it's only 200 years old. It was an oven made for baking bread. In fact, there was a tannery about where you guys are standing, where they used human poo and urine to turn skins into leather. If you're willing to donate, I'm thinking of starting a new one. In fact, this oven was baking 400 loaves of bread at a time, and this bread was given to everybody, especially the convicts who found that it had ergot mould laced within it. In fact, this was a deliberate ploy by the authorities to make it go mouldy within a day or two, so convicts couldn't take it as escape rations. It was a dastardly plan, dreamed up by the authorities, who were at the time dining out on their choice of baked wombat, roast swan or stuffed echidna. And they say the echidna was their favourite because it came with free toothpicks. These are the kind of people they were. They were wildlife killers, weren't they, wildlife? In fact, the convicts started taking it upon themselves to grow and catch their own food. They grew fish, caught fish in the waters, and they got wallabies as well in the work gangs. They caught them in pit traps. Their vegetables they were growing themselves were all right, but they were also growing in their own poo, and it was not a good deal for them. They even, after making their own tucker, sold things to the military, who started to make trades. There was tea, rum, sugar and tobacco, and there was all sorts of deals going on in the underground of Sarah Island. Let's go up the path here to the administration area, and we'll talk about how it happened. So this is the administration area. There's a couple of ways in which the convicts made money for themselves. You know, it was only 12 years of history, and they did quite a lot to support their lives. In fact, the first way is carving beautiful walking canes. A convict called Richard Pell, he went to the shoreline for his work duties, and he carved sticks into beautiful artistic walking canes, which he sold to the gentry in Hobart, who took them for a really good price and cheated the convicts on the deal, in fact, because they had to be sold by the corrupt military officer, Major Chan. He was cheating the convicts, and the convicts dobbed him in and got him dismissed from the island for too obviously trading with the convicts. And then 20 years later was made Tasmania's first ever premier, so things would never change around here, it seems. Vote green. There's another way as well. Started at the female factory in Hobart. Has anyone been to such a place? You've seen it? What's it like?
Pretty horrible.
Pretty horrible, yeah. That's because you went with your husband. Just kidding. I definitely am. You're a wonderful bloke.
Thank you.
You know, the female factory, they had women in there who were organised into a gang. They discovered the system was quite septic and they started to organise some life for themselves. They bound together, and while they were ordered to go and work in all the houses and be servants of the rich folk, they also took sketches of how to break in and out of all the houses they'd been assigned to. In fact, they noticed where all the valuables were kept and when Mrs. Marple went off to her evening Zumba class. So they took the proceeds from there and brought them here to Sarah Island, where they posted one of their own. A woman called Sarah Simmons had decided to work here, and she distributed the goods to all the convicts without any corruption getting in between. So the convicts here were so significantly buoyed by her way of life, the ordinary folks back in England decided to commit a crime just in the hopes of getting sent to Sarah Island, because they could get in on the action. It was quite a wonderful way. The convicts supported life. In fact, they started to bubble and find ways of autonomy. This is the administration area in the stand of blackwood trees. Here come the wildlife. And these are convict clerks who work for the administrators in there. They took official records of things like the flogging rates given out, which is like in 1828, 198 men received 8,000 floggings. And the year after, 30 men received 800 floggings. A giant drop-off happened in the punishment rate overnight. In fact, it was a significant day because everything changed on this day. Escape attempts dropped to almost zero and the flogging rates dropped, and we're about to see that the convicts started sleeping in a better place just down the path here on this key date of 1829, March 31st. So come and have a look. I expected that from you. You brought sunnies and a scarf. You're a man dressed for Tasmanian weather. And an umbrella. And running shoes. This building over here is the biggest building built on the island and a beautiful grand design. It was built in 1829, of course, and was designed as a courthouse to mete out justice to the convicts here on Sarah Island, so they wouldn't have any lag between the justice and the crime. This building was beautiful. It had fluted columns either side of the entrance, sandstone steps leading up to the doorway, royal insignias carved over the doorway lintel, and in fact all over the building. It was 3 stories high. It had small red bricks. Those are the fireplaces for heating it, and it was quite substantial and beautiful. And yet this building, designed as a courthouse, was given to the convicts in 1829 as their sleeping quarters. They call it the New Penitentiary, and it was housing 80 or 90 convicts at a time. They were in there and they were quite comfortable. They described it in their own words as a comfortable place to sleep. That's how they felt about it in the end. It was a relative comfort. A lot of the convicts, when they were working, would be off in the work camps, like sleeping up the rivers cutting hew and pine logs, and sleeping kind of rough. Now, the thing about this building is it also had Palawa Aboriginal people in it, who were the prisoners of war of the Black War, which was the result of British turmoil, and the convicts themselves viewed some of their crimes as the result of British turmoil as well, because the king in England, he turned on his own people, and you can think of it like that. He made it too tough to live. So the convicts here were upset, and this was 1829, near the end of the settlement's history. Things were starting to tremble. Things weren't going so well. The doctor here on the island, he actually said that if you punish the men the way that we're treating them, it does nothing for reformation and actually makes them more unable to live, more unable to work. So they knew the system wasn't working. and the convicts knew it best. And this is why the convicts started to work for their own freedom. They started to rebel, they started to just have their natural way of living, which clashed with the punishment, which decided they should be cowering. So, the convicts had the result in scoring a win in 1829, March 31st. Things changed. We're going to go down the path here, and we'll meet in the shelter, and we'll talk about what happened, the convicts and the authorities coming together at last. So let's go down here. The answer to say you don't know anything about cannibalism is the correct one, in fact, especially in a court of law. He was a cannibal who escaped from Sarah Island, here, this place, and he took 8 mates with him. In fact, he was quite a charismatic fellow and got 8 fellows together on a grand old escape attempt. And he went right across Tasmania, 6 weeks through wild weather, and he went all the way through to Hobart town, and he turned up on his own with none of his mates left, and a backpack on his shoulders with arms and legs sticking out of it like a little baby pack. You know what was that thing? A papoose. You know the arms stick out like that? So there's no head, and they'd eaten his mates on the way. Ew, I know, it's disgusting what these people do. In fact, they didn't believe that he'd eaten them because they just couldn't see the truth. They sent him back and he did it twice and somehow convinced another fellow to go again with him on the second time on an escape attempt. And in fact, he was finally hanged because that's what they deserve. In fact, there's a wonderful song which tells his entire life story, which my mate plays to me every time we go camping together in the bush. I've made it home every time since, so I'm a lucky dude, I think. That's Alex Pearce. He's quite a cool dude. In fact, there's one more story, which is about has anyone heard of The Ship That Never Was a play?
Yeah.
You have a little bit. It's a play which I used to act in. In fact, it's about convict stories, and I'll tell you about it. It follows on from this. So the gist is that I'm an actor in this play, and one day in a tour, some guy came up to me and told me about his friend Steve, who was drinking in the pub, a long-term alcoholic, and he was just drinking his life away, all wasted and sick and depraved looking and no teeth left, kind of like you. And in fact, the film crew filming a whole film movie about Alex Pearce's life walked into the pub after a day's shoot and saw him in the back of the bar, all like starving, and said he looked like a perfect shoo-in for one of the convicts in the escape. And so they got him into the film. He became a film star after that. So it turns out all you got to do if you want to be a film star is live a long life as an alcoholic. Get really drunk, and that's how I became an actor, folks. Final one. His name's on the walls too, Alexander Pearce. Here he is. Recaptured and returned to Macquarie Harbour. We're going to write "ew" on it after this tour, because that's appropriate as well. And there's someone else on the walls here. Have a good film of that. Check out this one as well. Matthew Brady, he was the gentleman bushranger who was out with his gang trying to set all the convicts free and run his own system. Except, you can see there, apprehended, tried and hanged in 1826. His gang was betrayed from within. A man called George Lacey, he was a traitor and he turned on his gang and got them all hanged. In fact, George Lacey, the traitor, was the only survivor of the gang to be sent for any more few years here to Sarah Island. He was put offshore on a small rock called Grummet Rock out there, and he committed more trouble because it was a tough place to be. In fact, I reckon he wanted the noose. So he did something deliberate. After trying to escape, that failed because he had chains on his legs and he couldn't swim. He drowned a man publicly with witnesses, so they made sure that he got the noose. And just before he was hanged, he was happy about it. He gave a speech, which happened to reach the convicts, and it fired them all up. It turned them for rebellion and told them things like they got their own language called Cant. They developed it in 12 years, enough that they could understand what they were saying and no one else could. In fact, are you speaking in Cant right there?
I just said that's a good idea.
It is a good idea, isn't it? I've noticed that from watching Inside World's Toughest Prisons, that language develops quicker in prisons than anywhere else on the globe, except for teenage daughters with a new iPhone, I suppose. But the convicts here, they also outnumbered prisoners, or outnumbered the authorities 4-1, and they started to turn for freedom from within. it was their way out. They discovered that no enemy or friend or hero or legal system could save them from the outside, and they were starting to turn to rebellion here where they already were. They started to become traitors to the system, and they were morally right, is how they felt about it. In fact, it was quite successful because there was a bit of luck with a new master shipwright who arrived here in 1829, around the same time, and he started building boats, world-class boats, with the hewn pine timber readily available here on the island. We're about to go to his shipyards, because that's the final tale of the story. He was a guy who could communicate with everybody, given the nature of his position in the hierarchy. I got to tell you about the shipyard.
Go for it.
I just got to go to the loo, that's all.
They're right here, we'll put it on YouTube. As a YouTuber, I'm sure it'll be an addition to the history of Sarah Island, I reckon.
It will be.
One of the worst horrific things we'd ever see on the island. Well, there's a couple of sites here. There's an island over there called Grummet Rock, which is an offshore island where they kept the hardest of the men like the traitor George Lacey, who was a murderer. And there were also female convicts sleeping there in the first year, running a hospital because they were skilled nurses, and they looked after the convicts here for a year until they sent them to the female factory in Hobart. So that's Grummet Rock, sometimes known as the Women's Island. And also, I got to tell you, I've paddled over and had a look. There's a cave in there where the women slept, which has a high tide mark right up to the back of the cave. It was very, very narrow and very difficult conditions for these women to be working. It possibly explains why there's so many dead. There's 80 people dead buried over there on Halliday's Island, and those are convicts. Now here's the shipyards where there's boat slips either side of me here. There's a large boat slip over there, which is made of blue gum logs. It's a boat ramp for launching the finished boats into the water on their first sea voyage. The small boat slip is just here. It's for 15-footer boats, 15 foot wide, 3 metres in the old money. There's also a stock floor under the earth there, which was made of hewn pine, so it's still preserved. If you dig down a bit and tap it, you can hear the timbers strong under there, because hewn pine can last forever. And that was 30 metres back into the bush, 8 metres wide, because that's the proportions of the largest boat ever built here on the island. 30 metres long. It's quite big. I would have had 3 or 4 toilets, just to tease you over there. You get into it,
Killed her.
Oh my god, it has. Look at it. Look at her eyes. She's tense. She's tense. I'm going to string this out of her. There were 3 rebellions on the island, and one was on the administration system. See, there was clever convicts here, not just labourers. There was these blokes who knew how to play the system. They knew the law. And in fact, they found that a doctor was manipulating the rations and getting extra rations sent to him, which he gave to his wife's chickens. So this was a legal business, and the convicts all knew it. And they actually had the power to do something about it. They took it to the law. And the law, being what it was, rigid and all, sided with the convicts. They did it on the key day of March 31st, 1829, when the books had to stay open. So they played the system beautifully, and they knew what they were doing. The second attack was onto the military, and you might want to turn your phone off for this one, because 4 convicts witnessed a soldier in the army in flagrante delicto with the Reverend Schofield's goat. Oh my god, yes. Look at his face. That's the face the goat did at the time. Oh, it's a tragic story. Unnatural act. Unnatural act by crikey. They had a kid afterwards. His name was Billy, and his mother was the horniest one in the yard. So it's a very tragic tale. They had several family holidays to New Zealand, which went really badly. And the nanny stepped in after all and put him right. That's Bill the kid. That demoralised the military and the farmyard. And loosened a few bowels as well, if you want to think about that. The last attack went down on one of these ships they built here, and the convicts sunk it deliberately with open sabotage. It was the way they finally got the commandant to leave, who resigned, and the man after him, he came into a place that was a bustling mess. In fact, He negotiated with the convicts and secured them rum rations, fishing on the weekends, good sleeping quarters, good food, and no punishment rates. With the help of the master shipwright working here, they had a relationship here. It's why they built 96 ships in 5 years, a world-class output of one coming off these slips every 3 weeks. It's quite amazing they turned this place around, from bloodthirstiness and punishment into one that was more focused on futures. Convicts had a future at last, and yet Governor Arthur, he decided to build Port Arthur on the east coast, and he named it after himself, because he was that kind of a man. He designed it to be solitary confinement and made it really punishing. So the convicts started escaping from here rather than being sent round to this new place, and the last 10 convicts ever left here, as the place shut down in 1834, were left working on the last ever boat. And they worked really hard on the last ever boat, so hard they felt a sense of ownership over it, which is what they told the guards when they threw them in the river. They stole the boat for themselves and took it round the world to Chile, and they went from there to Jamaica and America free. I'm pretty sure I've seen some of them on David Letterman. In fact, they were real heroes. They made it global. This is told in that play, The Ship That Never Was, that I told you about. Has anyone seen it? No, it's worth going to. I won't be in it tonight, but it's people like me. It's on every night in the Strawn Amphitheatre near the Visitors Information Centre. Am I going on a bit?
No, you're right.
She's beyond it.
She's beyond. She's already done a little release, I think. It's good to get released from Sarah Island. It's a good thing. You should be smiling. Well, that's about it for the tour. There's books available as well. And the hero of one of the books, who wrote his own book, is called Jimmy Porter. He was the hero of this island who organised that last escape attempt, which was the one told in The Ship That Never Was played. He taught himself to read and write, which is quite an amazing feat for a convict, and he wrote his whole life story down in his own words, which is why he's the hero of every single event he's ever been involved in. He's like 6 foot tall, handsome, brilliant artist, creative writer. I've been reading his book, can you tell? He tells me everything, it's absolute gospel. The book is called Travails of Jimmy Porter. It's for sale. There's other books for sale, like a small comic book. There's, because I'm on camera, I'll do it all by the book. Little comic book, Travails of Jimmy Porter. And of course, the Sarah Island Conspiracies, which is a big tome written by the bloke who wrote my tour. Not some of the released jokes, but most of them. And in fact, this has got pictures of fish in it, hand drawn by convict artists to moisten out the dryness of pure information. So there you go, they're all for sale. You can get them at the cruise terminal. And
I'm the only person that needs to go now. Because I think everybody needs to go now.
Well, you better go and lead us off back to the toilets. Everyone meet with her in the toilets.
She's gone.
And have a good day, folks. Thanks for coming on my tour.
Thank you.
Well done. See you, Kevin.
See ya.